You know, if someone had asked me a year ago what my life looked like, I'd have told them it was damn near perfect. I had a beautiful wife, Sophia, who I thought loved me as much as I loved her. Two amazing kids, Emma and Liam, who could light up any room with their laughter. And a steady job that allowed me to provide for my family without missing the important moments. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't complaining. Life was simple, stable, and good, or so I thought. Looking back now, I see the signs were there. The cracks in the foundation. They were subtle at first, easy to dismiss as the growing pains of a busy household. Sophia had always been ambitious, and I loved that about her. She worked harder than anyone I knew, pouring her energy into climbing the corporate ladder at Maxwell Enterprises. And her boss, Mr. Maxwell, was a name that carried weight. Charismatic, powerful, self-made man. If you believed the glossy magazine covers that featured him every other month. At first, I admired her dedication. She wanted to succeed, to help build a future for our family, and I respected that. But somewhere along the way, her ambition became something else. It started innocently enough, or at least I convinced myself it did. Late nights at the office, business dinners that ran longer than expected, missed family events. Maxwell's pushing us hard, she'd say with an exhausted smile, her phone clutched tightly in her hand like it was an extension of her body. He's just trying to get this new project off the ground. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. I trusted her. But then there were the other things. Little things that, at the time, I brushed off as stress or exhaustion. She stopped meeting my eyes when we talked. Her laughter, God, her laughter, became a rare sound in our home, replaced by the hollow monotone of someone just going through the motions. And the phone, always the phone. It became a permanent fixture in her hand, buzzing constantly with messages and emails. She'd angle the screen away from me, sometimes stepping out of the room entirely to take a call. Work, she'd say when I asked. You know how it is. I told myself not to overthink it. She was busy. She was stressed. Maxwell was a demanding boss, and she was just trying to keep up. But late at night, as I lay awake in bed next to her while she typed furiously on her laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the distance between us. It was her sudden evasiveness, the way she'd bristle if I asked too many questions about her day, the way she'd deflect when I suggested we take a weekend trip with the kids to reconnect. I can't, David. You know how busy things are right now. Maxwell would kill me if I took time off. Maxwell. Always Maxwell. His name became a shadow in our home, looming over every conversation. The kids noticed it too. Emma, our oldest, asked me one night why Mommy didn't come to her school play. I didn't know what to say. I told her Mommy was working hard so we could all have nice things, and Emma just nodded, her big, innocent eyes filled with disappointment. I told myself it was temporary, that once this project, whatever it was done, things would go back to normal. But the truth was, I didn't even know what normal looked like anymore. One evening, I decided to surprise her at the office. It wasn't a grand gesture, just me trying to reconnect. I brought her favorite takeout and showed up unannounced, thinking she'd appreciate the effort. But when I got there, her assistant looked surprised to see me. Sophia? Oh, she left hours ago, she said, her brow furrowed. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. When she finally came home later that night, I asked where she'd been. She hesitated, a fraction of a second too long, before rattling off some excuse about a last-minute meeting. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Really wrong. It wasn't just the late nights, or the missed family events. It wasn't just the phone glued to her hand, or the way she seemed to disappear into herself whenever Maxwell's name came up. It was the look in her eyes when she lied to me. I didn't recognize her anymore, but I wanted to. God, I wanted to believe that this was just a rough patch. That the woman I married, the woman who laughed at my terrible jokes and danced barefoot in our kitchen, was still in there somewhere. I started paying closer attention, watching, listening, trying to piece together the fragments of a puzzle I didn't even know I was holding. And that's when I saw it. The text message. It was late, past midnight, and I had just gotten up to grab a glass of water. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, lighting up with a notification. I wasn't proud of what I did next, but something compelled me to look. Had a great time tonight. Can't wait to see you again. Maxwell. My hands trembled as I set the phone back down. My heart raced, a mix of anger, fear, and betrayal flooding my chest. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. Not yet. But the perfect illusion of our life? It shattered in an instant. And I knew, no matter what it took, I had to find out the truth. It started with the work events. Maxwell wants the team to bond, Sophia said one evening as she slipped on her heels, her reflection glowing in the mirror. It's important for morale. She didn't meet my eyes when she said it, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Team-building dinners, late-night brainstorming sessions, even weekend retreats. These things happened in corporate jobs. I wanted to trust her. After all, she was my wife. But it wasn't just the frequency of the events. It was the way she talked about them. Or rather, didn't talk about them. She'd come home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers and wine that she didn't drink at home. When I'd ask her how it went, she'd give vague answers. It was fine. Long day. I'm exhausted. I started noticing other things, too. Her phone, always buzzing, became like a part of her hand. She'd keep it face down on the table or clutch it tightly whenever I walked by. If I asked who was texting, she'd brush it off. Work stuff. You know how it is. But I didn't know how it was. Not anymore. Then there was the call. The call that changed everything. It was a Wednesday night. Sophia had gone upstairs to shower, and her phone, for once, was left unattended on the kitchen counter. It vibrated once, then again. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach twisted when I saw the name. Maxwell. The call went unanswered, but the phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. I wasn't proud of it, but I pressed play. Hey, Sophia. Maxwell's smooth, confident voice filled the kitchen. I know you said not to call, but I can't stop thinking about tonight. Call me back when you can. My hand tightened around the phone as the message ended. Thinking about tonight? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself there could be an innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew better. When Sophia came back downstairs, I didn't say a word. I just watched her, studying the way she moved, the way she avoided my gaze. I had never felt so far from the woman I thought I knew. The next day, I called Alex. Alex was my oldest friend, the kind of guy who could hack into a system or crack a code with one hand tied behind his back. I need your help, I told him, my voice shaking. It's Sophia. Something's not right. He didn't ask questions. That's the thing about Alex. He'd back me no matter what. He came over that evening, his laptop in tow, and we got to work. Let's start with her phone, Alex said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He connected it to his system, bypassing her lock screen like it was child's play. Within minutes, he had access to everything: texts, emails, photos. What we found confirmed my worst fears. There were messages from Maxwell, dozens of them, buried under work-related conversations to avoid suspicion. Messages that started innocently enough, compliments on her work, jokes about their coworkers. But they quickly turned personal. You looked incredible tonight. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? Then there were the photos. Photos of the two of them at a dinner I didn't know about. Photos of her smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. And worst of all, a photo of them in what looked like a hotel room. Her in a dress I didn't recognize, him with his hand on her waist. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I scrolled through the evidence, each message and image another dagger to the heart. Alex looked at me, his face grim. I'm sorry, man. Sorry didn't begin to cover it. My wife was having an affair. Not just with anyone, but with Maxwell, the man whose name had become a curse in my home. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to scream and demand answers. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Confronting her without a plan would give her the upper hand, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I thanked Alex and sent him on his way, then sat in the dark, staring at my sleeping children through the baby monitor. They didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve this. But if Sophia thought she could betray me and get away with it, she was wrong. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to make her, and Maxwell, pay. I never thought I'd have to share my dinner table with a man like Maxwell. Yet there he was, sitting across from me in my own home, with a smug grin plastered across his face. He had invited himself over, or, more accurately, Sophia had invited him without so much as consulting me. "It's just dinner," she said when I questioned her earlier that afternoon. "Maxwell wants to connect with the family. It's a good opportunity for us." Us? There was no us in this equation anymore. Not after everything I'd uncovered. But I bit my tongue, deciding to endure the evening for the sake of appearances. I needed more time to figure out how to play my hand. The moment Maxwell walked through the door, he owned the space, acting like he was hosting us instead of the other way around. Dressed in a tailored suit that screamed wealth and power, he exuded arrogance with every step. He barely acknowledged me, brushing past with a curt nod before turning his full attention to Sophia. "Dinner smells amazing, Sophia," he said, his tone dripping with familiarity. Too much familiarity. He placed a hand on her lower back, a touch that lingered far too long for my liking. My jaw clenched, but I said nothing. Not yet. We sat down to eat, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Maxwell dominated the conversation, regaling us with stories of his business conquests and elite connections. He spoke as if he were God's gift to humanity, pausing only to throw in the occasional backhanded comment aimed squarely at me. "So, David," he said, swirling his wine like some kind of aristocrat, "what do you do again?" "Oh, right. Something modest, isn't it?" My fists tightened under the table. "I work in logistics," I replied evenly, refusing to rise to the bait. "Ah, logistics," he said with a smirk. "Keeping the world moving, one box at a time. Admirable." Sophia chuckled nervously, glancing at me like she expected me to laugh along. I didn't. Maxwell wasn't done. "It's amazing, really," he continued, leaning back in his chair, "how some people can be content with such ordinary lives. It takes a special kind of humility, don't you think?" That was it. I set down my fork and looked him dead in the eye. "You must be pretty insecure to come into another man's home and try to undermine him in front of his family." The room fell silent. Maxwell's smirk faltered for a split second before he leaned forward, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'm just being honest, David. A man has to assert himself in this world. If you can't handle that, well..." His words trailed off, but the implication was clear. "I think you've overstayed your welcome," I said, my voice cold. Sophia gasped. "David, stop. Maxwell is our guest." "Our guest? Or your partner?" The words escaped before I could stop them, and Sophia's face went pale. Maxwell stood, adjusting his suit jacket. "You should watch your tone," he said, stepping closer to me. "I could make things very difficult for you, David. For your family." And then it happened. He raised his hand, as if he was about to slap me. The audacity of it. This man, in my house, thinking he could physically assert his dominance over me, was the final straw. Instinct took over. I caught his wrist midair and twisted. There was a sickening crack as his hand bent at an unnatural angle, and Maxwell let out a howl of pain. He staggered back, clutching his broken hand, his face contorted in rage and humiliation. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice shaky. Sophia rushed to his side, her eyes wide with anger. "David, what the hell is wrong with you? You didn't have to do that." "Didn't I?" I shot back. "He came into our home, disrespected me, and tried to hit me. And you're defending him?" "He's my boss," she yelled, as if that justified everything. "No, Sophia," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "He's not just your boss. Don't insult my intelligence." She looked away, guilt flashing across her face for a brief moment before she turned back to Maxwell, helping him toward the door. "You've lost it," she hissed as they left. But I hadn't lost it. For the first time in months, I saw things with perfect clarity. That moment wasn't just a confrontation. It was confirmation. Sophia had chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. But if she thought I was going to sit back and let them ruin my life, she had another thing coming. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When Sophia walked out of the house that night with Maxwell, something in me snapped. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, colder. A A quiet resolve that told me I wouldn't let this man destroy my family without a fight. Maxwell wasn't just an arrogant, manipulative boss. He was something far worse, and I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, I sat in the quiet of my home office, replaying everything I knew about Maxwell. He wasn't just a name in my wife's life. He had inserted himself into her world, her thoughts, her loyalty. This wasn't about love. This was about power. And I suspected his power wasn't just built on charisma and business savvy. I started by searching online. Maxwell Enterprises looked clean on the surface, too clean, almost like it was curated to project perfection. Articles praised Maxwell as a self-made man, a visionary leader. But the more I read, the more hollow it all seemed. There were whispers on forums, anonymous comments from disgruntled employees. Phrases like cover-ups, cooked books, and hush money popped up repeatedly. I needed more than rumors, though. I needed proof. That's when Sarah came into the picture. Sarah had been a mid-level executive at Maxwell Enterprises until a few months ago. I remembered seeing her name in a headline, "Former Maxwell exec blows whistle on toxic work environment." I found her contact information buried in an old interview and reached out, half expecting to be ignored. To my surprise, she responded within hours. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. Sarah was sharp, no nonsense, and carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. "I've been waiting for someone like you to call," she said, sipping her coffee. I knew Maxwell's arrogance would catch up with him eventually. I told her everything about Sophia, the affair, and the grip Maxwell seemed to have on her. Sarah listened intently, her expression unreadable. "I hate to break it to you, David," she said finally, "but your wife isn't the first person he's done this to. Maxwell has a pattern. He preys on ambitious women, manipulates them, and discards them when they're no longer useful. And that's just the personal side of things. Professionally, he's even worse." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward. Sarah opened her laptop and began scrolling through files. "I worked for Maxwell for 8 years, she said. "I saw everything: embezzlement, fraudulent accounting, shell companies. He's been skimming money off his own projects for years, funneling it into offshore accounts. He bribes officials to keep quiet and intimidates anyone who gets too close to the truth." She turned the laptop toward me, showing spreadsheets, emails, and internal memos. "These are copies I saved before I left. They're enough to bring him down if they land in the right hands." I stared at the screen, a mix of disbelief and fury boiling inside me. Maxwell wasn't just a cheat. He was a criminal, hiding behind his wealth and influence. "What about Sophia?" I asked quietly. "Do you think she knows?" Sarah hesitated. "It's hard to say. Maxwell doesn't share his secrets lightly, but if she's close to him, she might have seen or heard things. Even if she hasn't, she's already collateral damage in his games. He uses people, David. That's all they are to him, tools to feed his ego and power." Her words hit me like a gut punch. Sophia wasn't just having an affair. She was entangled in something far bigger and far more dangerous than she realized. "Why hasn't anyone stopped him?" I asked. Sarah sighed. "Money, influence, fear. Maxwell knows how to silence people, either by buying them off or threatening them. That's why you need to be careful, David. If you go after him, he'll come after you." I nodded, my jaw tight. "Let him try. I'm not afraid of him." Sarah smiled faintly. "Good. You're going to need that courage." I spent the next few weeks working with Sarah, piecing together a case against Maxwell. Every night, after putting the kids to bed, I pored over files and documents, connecting the dots in his tangled web of deceit. The more I uncovered, the more disgusted I became. This wasn't just about me or Sophia anymore. Maxwell had hurt countless people, using his power to exploit, manipulate, and destroy. He thought he was untouchable, but he was wrong. As I closed my laptop one night, staring at the mountain of evidence we had gathered, I felt a new sense of purpose. Maxwell's arrogance had blinded him to the truth. Everyone is vulnerable, no matter how powerful they think they are. And I was going to prove it. I knew I couldn't take Maxwell down without hitting him where it hurt the most: his reputation and his empire. But to do that, I needed time and information, both of which required playing a role I despised. I had to pretend to reconcile with Sophia, to act like the doting husband willing to mend the cracks in our marriage. It made my skin crawl, but it was the only way to set the trap. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I approached Sophia in the kitchen. She was scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. "Sophia," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we need to talk?" Her eyes flicked up to me, guarded but curious. "About what?" I sighed, pretending to struggle with my words. "About us. I know things haven't been great between us lately, and I want to fix that. For the kids, for our family." She looked surprised, even a little relieved. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head. Maybe she thought I didn't know about the affair, that I was just a clueless husband trying to save a sinking ship. I let her think that. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted, her tone carefully neutral, "but I'm glad you're willing to work on things." That was my opening. Over the next few weeks, I leaned into the role of a husband seeking reconciliation. I made breakfast for the kids every morning, picked them up from school, and took on the bulk of the parenting duties. Sophia, meanwhile, continued to be distant, claiming work was still overwhelming. I didn't push her. Instead, I watched and waited. When she left her phone unattended, I documented her text conversations with Maxwell. I didn't just take screenshots. I printed them, along with timestamps and call logs. I recorded her late-night absences, detailing how often she came home hours after she was supposed to. Every detail went into a carefully organized folder labeled "Simply Evidence." Sophia's neglect of the kids was painfully easy to document. She missed Emma's piano recital, claiming she had a last-minute meeting. She forgot to sign Liam's permission slip for a school trip, leaving me to smooth things over with his teacher. The kids noticed, too. One night, Emma asked me, "Why doesn't Mommy come to my stuff anymore?" I forced a smile and told her Mommy was busy, but the guilt weighed on me like a stone. While I gathered evidence at home, Sarah worked tirelessly on the other end. She helped me compile a damning dossier on Maxwell's illegal activities, embezzlement, fraud, and bribes, all backed up with financial records and internal emails. We decided to leak the information anonymously, timing it perfectly to hit regulatory agencies and the media at the same time. Maxwell was about to face a storm he couldn't control. I remember the night we sent the first wave of documents. Sarah and I sat in her small office, the tension thick between us. "This will get attention," she said, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Are you ready for what comes next?" I nodded. More than ready. With a single click, the first batch of evidence was sent to investigative journalists, government watchdogs, and regulatory agencies. Within hours, the news began to spread. Headlines screamed of Maxwell's alleged corruption, with leaked documents backing up every claim. Social media exploded with speculation and outrage, and Maxwell's carefully curated image of success began to crumble. At home, I played the role of the oblivious husband, watching Sophia grow increasingly agitated as the scandal unfolded. She spent hours on the phone with Maxwell, her voice tense and hushed. "It'll blow over," she assured him, though her expression told a different story. But the real trap was yet to spring. My plan wasn't just to expose Maxwell. It was to force Sophia to confront her role in the mess she'd helped create. Late one night, as she paced the living room on yet another call with Maxwell, I quietly set up a camera to record her conversation. "David doesn't know anything," she said, her voice sharp. "I've kept it under control. He's just distracted with the kids." Her words stung, but they were exactly what I needed. When she hung up, I confronted her with the evidence: photos, texts, call logs, and now, the video of her betrayal. "You think I didn't know?" I said, my voice calm but firm. "You've been lying to me, to our kids, and for what? Him?" She froze, her face pale as I laid everything out. "This isn't just about us anymore, Sophia. It's about what you've done to this family." Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The trap was set, and now it was time to see how far they'd fall. The day I decided to contact Clarissa Maxwell was the day I turned the tide. Maxwell had spent years building an empire of deceit, but like all towers of lies, It only needed one sharp push to come crashing down. Clarissa wasn't just his wife. She was the linchpin of his public persona, a socialite with a flawless reputation. She was the kind of woman people admired and envied in equal measure. And Maxwell relied on her image as much as his own to maintain his power. I knew that exposing the affair would hurt Sophia, but by this point, my focus was on the bigger picture. Sophia had chosen her path. I had to choose mine, for my kids and for myself. Clarissa, however, was innocent in this mess. She deserved to know the truth, and I had every intention of making sure she found out. It started with a carefully worded email. I kept it simple. Mrs. Maxwell, I apologize for reaching out this way, but I believe you deserve to know the truth about your husband. Attached, you'll find evidence of his ongoing affair with my wife, Sophia. I am not sending this out of malice, but out of a belief that you should not be kept in the dark. The decision of what to do with this information is yours. Sincerely, David. Attached were the incriminating photos, text messages, and call logs. Everything she needed to confirm what I already knew. I didn't expect a response, but it came within hours. Her reply was curt, cold even. Meet me at the Redwood Cafe tomorrow at noon. The next day, I sat across from Clarissa in a secluded corner of the cafe. She was as composed and elegant as I expected, but there was fire behind her eyes, a fury barely contained. Is this real? She asked, sliding the folder of evidence across the table. Yes, I said simply. I wish it wasn't, but it is. She sat in silence for a moment, staring at the table. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. You've given me a lot to think about. Don't contact me again. And with that, she left. I didn't hear from her after that, but I didn't need to. Within days, news of the Maxwells' divorce exploded across every media outlet. Clarissa didn't hold back. Her public filings cited irreconcilable differences stemming from infidelity and included just enough detail to fuel speculation without naming names. The media latched onto the story, and Maxwell's carefully crafted image began to unravel. The fallout was swift and brutal. Investors started pulling out of Maxwell Enterprises, stock prices plummeted, and his business partners distanced themselves. The once untouchable Maxwell was now the subject of tabloid headlines and late-night talk show jokes. And then there was Sophia. The affair wasn't a secret anymore, at least not in our circle. Words spread like wildfire, and it wasn't long before friends and family started calling, texting, and showing up unannounced. But their tone wasn't supportive. It was judgmental, accusatory. How could you do this to David? One of her friends demanded during an uncomfortable visit. Do you even care about your children? Another asked over the phone. Even her parents, who had always adored her, expressed their disappointment. You've embarrassed this family, Sophia, her mother said during a particularly tense conversation. She tried to explain herself, to defend her choices, but the more she spoke, the more isolated she became. Friends stopped inviting her to gatherings. Family members began avoiding her calls. She was drowning in the very shame she'd brought on herself. I didn't revel in her downfall, but I couldn't deny the vindication I felt. For months, I had been the one questioning myself, wondering what I could have done differently to save our marriage. Now, everyone saw the truth. At home, Sophia's attempts to engage with me were met with cold indifference. David, we need to talk, she said one evening, her voice trembling. There's nothing left to talk about, I replied, barely looking up from the papers I was reviewing. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. I knew I sounded harsh, but I couldn't afford to soften. Not now. Maxwell's empire was in ruins, and Sophia's social standing was in shambles. But this was just the beginning. I had more to do, more pieces to move. Because while their reputations were collapsing around them, I still had one goal left: to protect my children and secure their future. And I wasn't stopping until I had everything I needed to make that happen. Walking into the courthouse that day, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite put into words. Anger? Sure. Determination? Absolutely. But there was also a heavy sadness that sat in my chest like a stone. This wasn't what I wanted for my family. Divorce was never supposed to be part of the story. But Sophia had left me no choice. I had given her every chance to come clean, to own up to her mistakes, and to put our children first. Instead, she doubled down on lies, prioritizing her affair and her image over the family we had built together. That was the line she crossed, the line I couldn't forgive. My lawyer, Ethan, was a no-nonsense professional who understood the stakes. "We're going for full custody," he said firmly during our first meeting. "The evidence you've gathered is compelling. We can argue neglect, infidelity, and a failure to prioritize the kids' well-being. It's a strong case." I nodded, clutching the folder of evidence that had become my lifeline. Inside were copies of text messages, call logs, photos, and detailed notes documenting Sophia's repeated absences and neglect. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about her choices as a mother. In court, the atmosphere was tense. Sophia sat on the other side of the room, her once confident demeanor replaced by visible unease. She avoided my gaze, her focus fixed on the table in front of her. Maxwell was nowhere to be seen. I wasn't surprised. He had enough of his own legal problems to deal with. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and faced the judge, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "Your Honor," I began, "this isn't just about a failed marriage. It's about ensuring my children have a stable and nurturing environment. Over the past year, my wife has prioritized her affair over her responsibilities as a mother. She has repeatedly missed important events in their lives, left me to handle their care alone, and brought instability into our home. I presented the evidence piece by piece, each document reinforcing my claims. Photos of Sophia at Maxwell's private dinners, while Emma's piano recital went unattended. Text messages confirming late-night rendezvous while Liam was homesick, asking for his mom. Financial records showing unexplained expenses tied to her outings with Maxwell. Ethan followed with a blistering argument, emphasizing the impact of Sophia's actions on our children. "David has been the primary caregiver," he said, addressing the court. "He has provided a consistent, loving environment for his children while Sophia has neglected her duties as a parent. The evidence is clear. David is the parent best suited to have full custody." When it was Sophia's turn to respond, she faltered. Her lawyer attempted to paint a picture of a stressed career woman juggling too many responsibilities, but the evidence was damning. Sophia's voice cracked as she tried to explain herself. "I made mistakes," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "But I love my children. I want to be part of their lives." Her words sounded hollow, even to me. The judge, an older woman with a stern but fair demeanor, listened intently before turning her attention back to me. "Mr. David, your case is compelling, but custody decisions must focus on the best interests of the children. Are you prepared to take on full responsibility for their care?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said without hesitation. "I've been doing it already." After hours of deliberation, the judge delivered her verdict. In light of the evidence presented, full custody of the children is awarded to Mr. David. Mrs. Sophia will be granted supervised visitation rights, pending a review after 6 months. Sophia broke down in tears, but I didn't feel triumphant. There was no joy in watching the mother of my children crumble under the weight of her own choices. But there was relief. Relief that Emma and Liam would have the stability they deserved, free from the chaos Sophia had brought into our lives. As I walked out of the courthouse, Ethan clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good today," he said. "Your kids are lucky to have you." I nodded, my thoughts already on Emma and Liam. This battle was over, but the war wasn't won. There were still wounds to heal, scars to mend. But for the first time in months, I felt like we had a chance at a future, a real future. And that was worth every fight, every sleepless night, and every ounce of pain. I always believed that arrogance was Maxwell's Achilles heel. He operated like he was untouchable, a king in his own empire, ruling through fear, manipulation, and an inflated sense of self-importance. But kings fall, and Maxwell was no exception. His world didn't just collapse. It imploded, and I made sure it was a spectacle for everyone to see. The first domino fell when the evidence Sarah and I compiled reached the right hands. Regulatory agencies and investigative journalists tore through the data like vultures. Headlines screamed Maxwell's name, and every skeleton in his closet was dragged into the light. Embezzlement, money laundering, and fraudulent deals that spanned years. It didn't take long for the authorities to act. One crisp Monday morning, Maxwell was escorted out of his office in handcuffs, his once pristine reputation shattered in an instant. Images of his arrest flooded the media, his expensive suit rumpled, his expression a mix of fury and humiliation. The man who had strutted through life like he owned the world now looked like a caged animal, cornered and powerless. But I wasn't done. Maxwell's downfall wasn't just about justice. It was about ensuring he could never recover from the destruction he had caused. I still had one final card to play, and it was one I knew would hit him where it hurt the most: his ego. Among the files Sarah had helped me recover were personal emails and video footage Maxwell had foolishly kept on his private devices. These weren't just documents of his crimes. They were a glimpse into the man behind the mask. Emails mocking his colleagues, insulting his business partners, and gloating about how easily he manipulated people. Video recordings of him bragging about his conquests, including his affair with Sophia, painting himself as some kind of alpha male incapable of failure. I knew the press would devour it. Carefully, I leaked the most damning pieces to select media outlets, ensuring they were timed perfectly with the ongoing coverage of his arrest. The headlines changed overnight. No longer was Maxwell just a corrupt businessman. Now, he was the subject of public ridicule. Maxwell caught on tape. They're all idiots who dance to my tune. Leaked emails reveal Maxwell's arrogant rants about partners and staff. Disgraced CEO boasted about affair in cringe-worthy videos. The internet exploded. Memes of Maxwell's smug face plastered over captions like, "When you think you're untouchable but end up in jail," spread like wildfire. Late-night talk show hosts had a field day, mocking him relentlessly. I'll never forget the day I saw one of those videos trending online. It was Maxwell at a private dinner, gesturing wildly as he laughed about his manipulation tactics. "People are stupid," he said in the video, raising a glass of wine. "You just dangle a carrot, and they'll follow you right off a cliff." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As his reputation spiraled, so did his personal life. His wife, Clarissa, didn't just file for divorce. She publicly condemned him, calling him a pathological liar and a disgrace to humanity. His former business partners distanced themselves, issuing statements of outrage and denial. Maxwell Enterprises, once a thriving company, crumbled under the weight of the scandal. Stockholders fled, and the board of directors scrambled to salvage what little was left. Maxwell himself wasn't just disgraced, he was ruined. His assets were frozen, his social circle evaporated, and his name became a punchline. The man who had once strutted through life with an air of invincibility was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel satisfaction watching it all unfold. Maxwell had tried to destroy me, my family, and countless others. Now, he was getting exactly what he deserved. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about ensuring he could never hurt anyone again. One night, as I watched the news coverage of his latest court appearance, Emma wandered into the living room and sat beside me. "Why are you smiling, Daddy?" she asked, her innocent eyes filled with curiosity. I paused, considering how to answer. "Because sometimes, bad people get what's coming to them," I said, pulling her into a hug. Maxwell's reign was over, his power dismantled, his ego crushed. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. I didn't expect her to come crawling back, but there she was, standing on my doorstep, looking like a shell of the woman I once knew. Sophia, my wife, the mother of my children, was no longer the confident, ambitious woman I had married. Instead, she looked hollow, her eyes red from crying, her face gaunt from the stress that had worn her down to nothing. It was a Wednesday afternoon when she showed up, the rain falling in heavy sheets outside. The kids were at their friend's house, giving me a rare moment of peace. I had just gotten the kids settled in bed the night before after another busy day of work and family obligations when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it without thinking, and there she stood, Sophia, drenched from the rain, a soaked coat clinging to her body. "David," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Can we talk?" I said nothing, only stepped aside to let her in. I couldn't bring myself to speak, not yet. Not when the hurt still felt so fresh. Sophia stepped into the foyer, looking around as if she hadn't seen the place in years. The walls that once echoed with laughter now felt cold and empty. Our home, my home, had become a refuge for my children and me, a place where the chaos of the past few months couldn't follow. And yet, there she was, forcing her way back into our lives. "I'm sorry, David," she said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice cracked with raw emotion. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant to hurt you or the kids." I stared at her, but my thoughts were miles away. Apology wasn't enough anymore. I had heard those words before, but they had lost all meaning. "You said that before," I said, my tone distant. "Back when you first cheated. And then again when I caught you." She flinched, as though my words were a slap to her face. But I couldn't stop myself. The pain was too deep. You don't get to hurt me and then ask for forgiveness like it's that simple. Like I'm just going to open my arms and take you back. I can't do that. Sophia stepped closer, desperation in her eyes. "David, please." I was lost. I don't know what happened to me. Maxwell. He twisted everything, made me believe that what we had wasn't enough. But now I see how wrong I was. I've lost everything. Maxwell, my reputation, my family, and you. Please, give me another chance. I'll do anything to make it right. I took a slow breath, my hands trembling as I clenched them into fists. "You lost everything, Sophia, but that's not my fault. And it's not my responsibility to fix you. What you did, what you chose, it's on you." Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. I could feel the guilt radiating from her, but I was past caring about her regrets. I had spent too many nights lying awake, wondering what I had done wrong, wondering where I had failed. But now I knew. It wasn't me. It was her. "I don't expect you to understand," I continued, my voice calm but firm, "but I have to protect my children. I can't have you in and out of their lives like this. Not after everything you've done." She lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. "I know, David. I know I've hurt them too. But I love them. And I love you." "Love?" I repeated, bitter laughter escaping my lips. "You've spent months lying to me, to our kids, to everyone. You destroyed us because of your selfishness, because you thought you could play with people's hearts without consequences. You don't get to just say, 'I love you,' and have it magically make everything better." She remained silent, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm sorry," she said again, barely above a whisper. I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. There were too many things that had been broken, too many pieces of trust that had been shattered beyond repair. She wanted me to believe in her again, but I couldn't. Not when I had watched her tear everything we had apart. The silence between us was suffocating, but I broke it after what felt like an eternity. "I'm not going to forgive you, Sophia. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever." She looked at me, her eyes full of disbelief. But what about the kids? What about the family we had?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'll make sure they grow up happy and safe. That's what matters now. They don't deserve this mess. They don't deserve you dragging them through your mistakes." I turned toward the door. "You need to go. We can't do this anymore." She didn't argue, didn't beg any longer. She simply nodded, stood up, and walked toward the door. Before she stepped outside, she turned to face me one last time. "I'll always love you, David," she said quietly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. And when the door closed behind her, I felt a strange sense of finality. There would be no second chances. Not for us. Not after everything she had taken from me. I watched her walk away through the window, her figure shrinking in the distance. And for the first time in months, I felt a weight lift off my chest. This chapter of my life was over. And no matter how much Sophia regretted it, I was determined to never look back. The first morning after Sophia left for good felt surreal. The house was quieter than it had been in months. No tension lingering in the air, no late-night whispers on her phone, no forced smiles over breakfast. It was just me and the kids, Emma and Liam, sitting at the kitchen table, eating pancakes and talking about their plans for the day. For the first time in a long time, the weight on my chest felt lighter. But rebuilding our lives wasn't going to be easy. The scars Sophia's betrayal left on me, and on the kids, would take time to heal. They missed their mom, and I wasn't going to lie to them or pretend everything was fine. Instead, I promised them one thing. I would always be there for them, no matter what. Is Mommy coming back? Liam asked one evening as I tucked him into bed. His voice was small, and his eyes filled with questions he was too young to fully understand. I knelt beside him, brushing his hair back gently. Mommy loves you, I said carefully, but sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that they can't fix. What's important is that you know none of this is your fault, and I'll always be here for you. Always. He nodded, his little face serious, and I kissed his forehead before turning off the light. Moments like that reminded me why I couldn't let bitterness consume me. The kids needed stability, love, and a father who could guide them through this storm. As the weeks turned into months, I threw myself into creating a home that felt safe and warm. We redecorated the living room together, Emma picking out bright yellow curtains while Liam insisted on a rug with a race car design. The small changes made a big difference. It felt like we were reclaiming our space, making it ours again. I also made time for the simple things: game nights, trips to the park, and lazy Sundays watching movies. The laughter that filled the house was real again, not forced or strained. It was a reminder that no matter how broken we felt, we could still find joy in the little things. Meanwhile, Maxwell's downfall continued to make headlines. His trial became a media circus, with every sordid detail of his corruption and deceit laid bare for the world to see. Witnesses came forward, evidence mounted, and it was clear that his once impenetrable empire had crumbled. The day he was sentenced to prison, I felt no joy, only a quiet sense of justice. Maxwell's arrogance had destroyed countless lives, including my own, but now he was paying the price. As for Sophia, she was left to rebuild her shattered life alone. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she struggled to find work after the scandal and that her once vibrant social circle had all but disappeared. She tried to reach out a few times, sending letters apologizing again and asking for updates on the kids. I kept my responses brief and focused solely on the children. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. But this wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about forging a new future. I started seeing a therapist, not just for myself, but to ensure I was the best father I could be. I learned how to process the pain, how to let go of the anger, and how to focus on what truly mattered: Emma and Liam. Work became a source of strength, too. I poured my energy into my job, earning a promotion that gave me more flexibility to spend time with the kids. My colleagues became a support system, offering encouragement and reminding me that I wasn't alone in this journey. And somewhere along the way, I started to heal. One evening, as the kids and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Emma leaned her head against my shoulder. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" she asked softly. I wrapped my arm around her and looked out at the horizon, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady. "We're going to be more than okay." In that moment, I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was rebuilding. The scars of betrayal would always be there, a reminder of what I'd been through, but they didn't define me. They didn't define us. This new chapter wasn't what I had planned, but it was ours. And as I looked at my children, their laughter echoing into the evening air, I knew we had a future full of hope and possibilities. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was at peace.